The cold light of the courtroom reflected on my face. Before me, Michael stood next to Christine, their hands intertwined as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The man I had slept beside for 17 years now looked like a stranger in his expensive gray suit. I stared directly into his eyes, unwavering, unblinking. No one thinks a single phone call can destroy 17 years of marriage in just 30 seconds. Until it happens to you. 45 days earlier. The aroma of lemon-thyme roasted chicken filled our kitchen. I set down the Mediterranean salad, completing our Thursday family dinner, a tradition we'd maintained for 10 years in the Collins household. This was the one time each week we all committed to sitting down together. No phones, no tablets, just stories and laughter. "Mom, I think my science project might win first place, Megan," my 13-year-old daughter said, her brown eyes lighting up with pride. Mrs. Wilson said, "My analysis of microplastic pollution in Lake Rivercrest was exceptional." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I smiled, placing my hand on her shoulder. "Dad will help you finalize the presentation this weekend, right, Michael?" Michael looked up from his phone, quickly tucking it into his pocket with an apologetic smile. "Of course, Princess. Can't let the brightest scientific mind in 8th grade work alone." Noah, our 10-year-old son, rolled his eyes. "I don't get why everyone's so excited about studying garbage. I'm doing solar-powered race cars and nobody calls that exceptional." "That's because you just want to play with toy cars," Megan teased, making Noah pout. "They're not toys. They're scientific models." I exchanged a sympathetic look with Michael as he poured water for everyone. These were the moments I cherished most. The small, seemingly insignificant pieces of ordinary family life that were actually precious beyond measure. Michael clinked his water glass against my wine glass, his eyes warm. "Congratulations," he said softly. "I heard the client loved your new design." I felt my cheeks warm. After years of putting my career on hold to raise our children, my freelance graphic design business was finally gaining traction. "It's just a small project." "Don't be so modest. You're good and they know it." There was something in the way he said it, a slight reluctance perhaps. I wondered if he was truly happy about my small success, but then he smiled, and I pushed the thought aside. We had built this life together. The 4-bedroom house in the best part of Lancaster Heights, 2 wonderful children, his stable career as an executive director at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital. Everything was on track. My phone rang, shattering the moment. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. "Let me get it!" Noah volunteered, but I shook my head. "I'll take it," I said, standing up and picking up the phone. "Hello? Is this Sarah?" An unfamiliar female voice, confident, young, something assertive in her tone. "Yes, this is Sarah. I thought you should know that Michael is moving in with me tomorrow. He's been promising for months, and I'm tired of waiting." Time froze. A ringing began in my ears. The room seemed to tilt. "This is Christine," the voice continued, seemingly from far away. "Michael and I have been together for 14 months now." I turned to look at Michael. His fork clattered to his plate, his face drained of color, white as paper. Megan stopped mid-chew, motionless, her eyes wide and alert. Only Noah continued eating, not yet grasping the tragedy unfolding. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to collapse onto the floor. But in front of my children, I could only stand there, gripping the phone until my knuckles ached. "I think you've said enough." I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to speak with my husband." I ended the call before she could respond. The silence that followed was suffocating, just the ticking of the wall clock and Michael's heavy breathing. "Kids," I said gently, my eyes not leaving Michael. "Please, go upstairs for a bit. Dad and I need to talk." "Mom," Megan started, her face already crumpling, understanding that something terrible had happened. "Now, please." I tried to project a calmness I didn't feel. When the children's footsteps had receded up the stairs, Michael finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I can explain. Don't say anything until the kids are upstairs." I cut him off, not wanting them to overhear. The sound of Megan's bedroom door closing softly echoed, and only then did I turn to face the man I thought I knew. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice trembling. Michael pushed his plate away. "Not the way she put it. Answer my question, Michael. Are you having an affair?" He looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "Yes." A scream caught in my throat. I gripped the edge of the chair to steady myself. 14 months? I asked. "Sarah." 14 months, Michael?" I pressed, needing to know the exact extent of this betrayal. He nodded, still not looking at me. "We met at the medical conference in Chicago last year, remember? The one where I had to stay 2 extra days?" Of course I remembered. I had rearranged our entire household schedule, canceled Noah's zoo trip, all so Michael could attend important meetings after the conference. Now I knew what those meetings were, or rather who they were with. "Christine," I said, tasting the name like bitter medicine on my tongue. "Who is she?" "She's the marketing director for North Star Pharmaceuticals," he replied, his voice hollow. "We met during a panel discussion." I tried to process this information, my mind racing to recalculate the past 14 months of our lives. Every late night at the office, every weekend conference, every business trip. How many had been lies? "You were planning to leave tomorrow?" I asked, the enormity of it hitting me in waves. "Without telling me? Without telling the children?" Michael finally looked up, his expression a mix of guilt and something else. "Relief? I was going to tell you tonight, after dinner." When the kids were in bed, a bitter laugh escaped me. The absurdity of his consideration, planning to destroy our family but waiting until after dessert. "And then what?" I demanded. "You'd pack a bag and disappear while they slept?" His silence was answer enough. The room tilted again as the full implications settled over me. Not just an affair. Those can be momentary weaknesses, regrettable mistakes. This was calculated. This was an exit strategy. This was Michael systematically constructing a new life while maintaining the appearance of commitment to ours. "How long have you been planning to leave?" I asked, needing to understand the scope of his deception. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Sarah, does it matter? It's not working between us. It hasn't been for years." "It matters to me," I said, my voice dropping dangerously low. "It matters to know how long my husband has been lying to my face. It matters to understand how much of our life together has been real, and how much has been a convenient holding pattern while you arranged your escape." The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the ensuing silence. Through the windows, I could see our neighbors walking their dog, laughing together, completely unaware that just feet away, my world was collapsing. "Since November," he finally admitted. "We've been talking about it since November." 6 months. 6 months of holiday celebrations, parent-teacher conferences, weekend trips, and mundane Monday mornings. 6 months of "I love yous" that were apparently nothing but placeholders. 6 months, during which I had actually thought we were doing better than we had in years. My mind raced backward, calculating. If they'd been together for 14 months and planning his departure for 6 months, that meant 8 months of active betrayal before he even considered leaving. 8 months of coming home to me after being with her. 8 months of lies stacked upon lies. The realization sent a wave of nausea through me. I gripped the edge of the dining table to steady myself against the vertigo of discovering your entire reality is counterfeit. And Christine, I said her name again, tasting its bitterness. Who is she? Where did you meet her? Michael shifted uncomfortably. She's a pharmaceutical marketing executive. She has a doctorate in biochemistry. She understands the pressures of my work. The implication hung in the air. That I, with my modest freelance design career and focus on our children, somehow didn't understand his important work. Does she know about Megan and Noah? I asked, suddenly terrified by the thought of this woman knowing details about my children's lives. Of course she does, Michael replied, sounding almost offended. I'm not some deadbeat who's abandoning his kids. No, you're just abandoning their mother, I shot back. You're just dismantling their home, their security, their understanding of what family means. His jaw tightened. I'm not happy, Sarah. Haven't been for a long time. Don't the kids deserve a father who's happy? The selfishness of his reasoning knocked the wind from me. Somewhere upstairs, I could hear Megan's music starting up, her usual method of drowning out our arguments. How many times had she done that? Thinking she was escaping normal marital disagreements, not realizing her father was plotting his departure. What they deserve, I said, fighting to keep my voice from breaking, is a father they can trust. A father who doesn't sneak around, building a life with someone else, while pretending to be committed to them. I pushed back from the table, suddenly unable to remain seated across from him. The wedding ring on my left hand caught the light, and the weight of it felt unbearable. 17 years of promises, encapsulated in a band of gold that apparently meant nothing to the man who had placed it there. Where are you going? Michael asked as I moved toward the stairs. To check on our children, who just overheard that their father is moving out tomorrow. I paused at the base of the staircase, turning back to him. Unless that too was a lie? Are you actually leaving tomorrow, or was that just something you've been telling her to keep her happy? His expression confirmed what I already suspected. I hadn't set a specific date, he admitted. I was going to figure out the logistics after we talked. So even his mistress was being fed half-truths. There was something oddly validating in knowing I wasn't the only one being manipulated, though the revelation did nothing to dull the acute pain radiating through my chest. Well, now you have a deadline, I said, surprising myself with the cold finality in my voice. She's expecting you tomorrow. I suggest you start packing. As I climbed the stairs to comfort my children, to somehow explain that the foundation of their lives was being ripped away because their father was unhappy, I felt something unexpected beneath the crushing weight of betrayal, a flicker of clarity, of resolve. Michael had made his choice, methodically and deliberately, over the course of more than a year. Now I would make mine. And unlike him, I wouldn't be building my future on a foundation of secrets and lies. I would face this head-on, with the same strength I'd always possessed but had somehow forgotten, while playing the role of devoted wife to a man who didn't deserve it. By the time I reached Megan's door, tears streaming silently down my face, I had already begun to formulate a plan. Michael might be walking out the door tomorrow, but he was gravely mistaken if he thought he could simply stroll into his new life, leaving nothing but devastation in his wake. He would learn that betrayal comes at a cost I intended to ensure he paid in full. Megan's door was closed but not locked. I knocked gently, then pushed it open to find her sitting cross-legged on her bed, headphones clamped over her ears, her history textbook open but clearly forgotten. When she saw me, she yanked the headphones off. Is Dad really leaving? Her voice was small, her eyes large and glistening with unshed tears. I sat beside her, my own heart splintering as I tried to formulate an answer that wouldn't collapse under the weight of the truth. Yes, sweetheart, it seems that way. For that woman? The one on the phone? I nodded, unable to dress it up with platitudes. Did you know before tonight? Megan's questions were direct, unsparing in their precision. She had always been this way. Analytical, observant, unwilling to accept simplified versions of complex realities. No, I whispered. I didn't know. A tear slid down her cheek. So he lied to you, to all of us. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. She considered this, her 13-year-old mind grappling with adult deceptions. How long have you and Dad been married? 17 years in August. The anniversary trip we discussed just last week, a weekend in the mountains, just the two of us, now revealed itself as another fiction he'd never intended to fulfill. That's my whole life, plus 4 years, Megan said, as if calculating the exact measurement of the betrayal. That's like forever. It felt that way to me, too, I admitted. She leaned into me then, her thin shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I wrapped my arms around her, rocking gently as I had when she was small. Over her head, I surveyed her room. The science fair ribbons pinned proudly to her bulletin board, the bookshelf overflowing with novels and field guides, the star chart Michael had helped her create last summer. So many moments, so many memories embedded in these 4 walls. What's going to happen to us? She finally asked, pulling back to search my face. To this house? To our family? The question bore down on me with crushing weight. What indeed? Our life wasn't just emotional connections and shared memories. It was a tangible, physical infrastructure that Michael had now destabilized. This 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs that we'd purchased 7 years ago, stretching our budget to get into the right school district. The mortgage with 23 years of payments remaining. The investment accounts for the kids' college funds. The joint checking and savings. The health insurance through Michael's job at the hospital. I don't know all the details yet, I told her honestly. But I promise you this. You and Noah are my priority. Whatever happens, I will make sure you're taken care of. She nodded, searching my face for reassurance. I wasn't sure I could authentically provide. How could I promise stability when the foundation had just been ripped from beneath us? Should I check on Noah? She asked, her innate protectiveness of her younger brother surfacing even amid her own pain. Let me do that, I said, kissing her forehead. Try to get some rest if you can. We'll talk more tomorrow. As I crossed the hallway to Noah's room, the reality of what lay ahead began to solidify with terrifying clarity. Single parenthood, financial restructuring, legal battles, the emotional fallout that would ripple through our lives for years to come. I found Noah in his bed, blanket pulled up to his chin, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling decorated with the glow-in-the-dark stars Michael had meticulously arranged into accurate constellations. Hey, buddy, I said softly, sitting on the edge of his bed. Is Dad mad at us? He asked immediately, his voice small and worried. The question pierced my heart. Of course that would be his interpretation, that he had somehow caused this catastrophe. No, sweetheart, not at all. Dad loves you very much. I stroked his hair, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that have nothing to do with their children. This is one of those times. But he's leaving. Megan said he's leaving us for another lady. I silently cursed the thin walls of our home, the impossible task of shielding one child from information the other had already absorbed. Dad and I are having some problems right now, I explained, the understatement of the century. He's going to be staying somewhere else for a while. With the lady on the phone, his directness was disarming. Yes, I admitted, seeing no point in fabricating a cover story he would eventually see through. Noah was quiet for a moment, processing. Will I still see him? Of course you will, I assured him, though I had no idea what custody arrangements might eventually materialize from this wreckage. You're his son. He loves you. Noah nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer, though the tremble in his lower lip betrayed his continued distress. Can you leave the hall light on tonight? Of course, I said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. I love you, Noah, so much. Love you too, Mom. As I left his room, leaving the door ajar and the hallway light on as promised, I was struck by the profound injustice of what Michael had done. Not just to me, a wife can recover from betrayal, can rebuild a life, but to these innocent children whose sense of security he had obliterated for his own selfish desires. Downstairs, I found Michael in his home office, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed tones. He looked up guiltily when he saw me in the doorway. I have to go, he said quickly into the phone, ending the call. Christine? I asked, though I knew the answer. He nodded, having the decency to look ashamed. She's upset, says she didn't mean to blurt it out like that. She thought you already knew. How convenient for both of you, I replied, my voice dripping with barely contained contempt. Our children are upstairs trying to understand why their father is abandoning them, but please, by all means, comfort your mistress during her time of distress. Michael flinched at the word mistress. It's not like that, Sarah. Christine and I. It's a real relationship. A real relationship built on deceit, I countered. How romantic. I moved into the office. My office too, where I ran my freelance graphic design business, where our family finances were organized, where the evidence of our intertwined lives was scattered across filing cabinets and bookshelves. What were you planning to tell them? I asked, gesturing upstairs. Before your girlfriend accelerated the timeline. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd once found endearing. That I was going to be staying somewhere else for a while. That adults sometimes need space to figure things out. Coward, I whispered. You weren't even going to tell them the truth. They're children, Sarah. What was I supposed to say? Hey kids, Daddy's in love with someone else? The casual way he referenced his love for this other woman sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. At least it would have been honest. Something you clearly struggle with. I moved to the filing cabinet, yanking open the drawer that contained our important documents, birth certificates, social security cards, property deeds, insurance policies. What are you doing? Michael asked, alarm evident in his voice. Taking inventory of what you're about to destroy, I replied calmly, pulling out folders. 17 years, Michael. 17 years of building a life that you're walking away from. I want to be very clear about exactly what that means. I laid the documents on the desk between us. Our mortgage statement showing the substantial equity we'd built in the house, the children's college funds, our retirement accounts, the joint bank statements. This is what's at stake, I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions swirling within me. Not just your comfortable suburban existence, but their future security. I'm not abandoning my financial responsibilities, he protested. We'll work something out. Will we? I asked skeptically. And what does that look like exactly? You supporting 2 households on your salary? Splitting assets that were meant to secure one family's future? Dividing holidays and birthdays and graduations? As I spoke, I pulled out our family photo albums from the bookshelf, opening one to a picture of us at the beach 3 summers ago. Noah on Michael's shoulders, Megan and I building an elaborate sandcastle, all of us smiling, sunburned, and happy. This is what you're walking away from, I said, pushing the album toward him. Not just me, us, this family we created, these memories, this life. For the first time since the phone call, I saw genuine conflict in Michael's eyes. Not enough to change his mind. I harbored no such illusions, but enough to suggest he hadn't fully confronted the magnitude of what he was destroying. "I still want to be their father," he said quietly. "That won't change." "Everything will change," I corrected him. "You're choosing to make sure of that." I closed the album with a decisive snap, then gathered the financial documents back into their folders. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on me. The legal consultations, the division of assets, the restructuring of our entire lives. But I refused to let Michael see me buckle under it. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight," he said. A statement, not a question. "How considerate of you," I replied. "Giving me one last night in our bed, before you move in with your girlfriend." He winced at my tone but didn't argue. As he turned to leave the office, I called after him. "Michael." He paused in the doorway, looking back at me. "I want you to know something," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I will survive this. The children will survive this. We will rebuild what you've broken, and we will thrive. But you have made a choice tonight that will ripple through all of our lives forever. I hope she's worth it." For a moment, doubt flickered across his features. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked away, leaving me alone among the artifacts of the life he no longer wanted. I sank into the office chair, surrounded by the evidence of 17 years together. Tax returns and holiday cards, family photos and mortgage statements, and allowed myself a moment of pure, undiluted grief for what had been lost. Tomorrow would require strength, strategy, and determination. But tonight, just for tonight, I would mourn the death of the life I had believed in. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay in our bed, my bed now, staring at the ceiling, replaying 17 years of marriage through the distorted lens of Michael's betrayal. Each memory now required re-examination. Had he been happy then? Was that laugh genuine? When had he first looked at me and thought, "Not enough"? Dawn broke with me still awake, my eyes burning, my mind racing. The house was quiet, too quiet, without Michael's familiar morning routine. No shower running, no coffee brewing, no NPR murmuring from the kitchen radio. Just silence and the weight of what was to come. I reached for my phone and texted my sister Jessica. "Need to talk. Emergency." Then I forced myself out of bed. The children would be waking soon, and they needed to see me functional, resilient, in control. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. I looked older somehow, as if the revelation had aged me overnight. My phone buzzed. Jessica calling back immediately despite the early hour. "What's wrong?" she asked without preamble, her voice thick with sleep, but alert with concern. "Michael's leaving me," I said, the words sounding surreal even as I spoke them. "He's been having an affair for 14 months. "What?" The shock in her voice mirrored what I had felt just hours before. "With who? How did you find out?" "Her name is Christine. She's a pharmaceutical marketing executive." I sat on the edge of the bathtub, suddenly dizzy. "She called during dinner last night. Announced to all of us that he's moving in with her today." "Oh my God, Sarah!" Jessica's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "The children heard everything?" "They heard everything," I confirmed. "She didn't know. We didn't know. Apparently, he's been telling her for months that he was leaving us." There was a long pause on the line. "That manipulative bastard," Jessica finally said, her initial shock giving way to protective anger. "I'm coming over. Give me an hour." "Thank you," I breathed, relieved not to face the day alone. After hanging up, I stood under the shower until the hot water ran cold, letting it wash away my tears. By the time I emerged, dressed, and made my way downstairs, I heard movement from the guest room. Michael was up. I busied myself in the kitchen, starting coffee and preparing cereal for the kids. Normalcy, or at least its appearance, felt important this morning. Michael entered a few minutes later, looking as haggard as I felt. He'd clearly slept as poorly as I had. "Morning," he said awkwardly, hovering in the doorway as if unsure of his welcome in what had been his kitchen just yesterday. I didn't respond, focusing instead on setting out bowls and spoons with mechanical precision. "Sarah," he tried again. "We should talk about how to handle today with the kids." I turned to face him, my expression deliberately neutral. "You're still leaving today?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I think it's best. A clean break." "Clean? For whom?" I asked coldly. Certainly not for Megan and Noah. Before he could respond, my phone chimed with a text notification. I glanced down, expecting Jessica, but saw instead a number I didn't recognize. "This is Christine. I'm sorry about last night. I truly thought you knew. Can we talk?" The audacity stole my breath. I showed the screen to Michael, whose face contorted with panic. "She has your number too?" I asked, a fresh wave of violation washing over me. "I didn't give it to her," he said quickly. "I swear." A horrible thought struck me. My God, Michael. Has she been in our house while we were gone? His expression told me everything. "Just once," he admitted. "About 2 months ago. You were at that graphic design conference in Chicago, with the kids visiting your parents." The room tilted dangerously. This woman had been in my home, walked through my rooms, perhaps even sat on my furniture, all while I was obliviously pursuing my career and caring for our children. The invasion felt physically sickening. "Did you sleep with her in our bed?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. The number Michael looked genuinely horrified. "God, no! She wanted to see where I lived. She was curious." "Curious," I repeated flatly. "About the life you were planning to abandon." Michael ran his hands through his hair. "It wasn't like that. She wanted to understand my world." "Your world," I echoed. "The one you built with me. The one you're destroying today." He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I should start packing." "Yes," I agreed coldly. "You should." As he retreated upstairs, I stared at Christine's message, considering how to respond. The temptation to unleash my fury was almost overwhelming, but what would that accomplish? Instead, I blocked the number without replying. She didn't deserve access to me or my emotions. The front door opened then, and Jessica swept in, her energy filling the kitchen like a burst of oxygen. At 31, 2 years my junior, she had always been my fiercest protector, from playground bullies to my first heartbreak. "Where is he?" she demanded, dropping her purse on the counter and enveloping me in a tight hug. "Upstairs, packing." My voice broke on the last word and Jessica's arms tightened around me. "Let me go up there and tell him exactly what I think of him," she growled. I shook my head. "The kids will be up soon. I don't want them to see more conflict." Jessica reluctantly conceded, then guided me to sit at the kitchen table while she took over coffee making. "Tell me everything." As I recounted the details, Christine's call, Michael's admission of his 14-month affair, his plans to leave, Jessica's expression darkened with each revelation. When I mentioned Christine had been in our house, she slammed her mug down so hard coffee sloshed over the rim. "That's breaking and entering," she fumed. "He let her in," I corrected wearily. "It's still a violation," Jessica insisted. "Sarah, have you checked your financial accounts, your credit cards, your joint savings?" I blinked, taken aback by the question. "Number? Why would I?" "Because men who lead double lives often finance them, she cut in grimly. I learned that from Diane's divorce last year. Her husband had been siphoning money for months before he left. Cold, dread, pooled in my stomach. I hadn't even considered that possibility. Opening my laptop, I logged into our online banking portal. Jessica looking over my shoulder. Our checking account showed normal activity. Bills paid, groceries purchased, the usual expenses of family life. But when I clicked on our joint savings account, intended for emergencies and major home repairs, the balance stopped me cold. That can't be right, I whispered. Where there should have been just over $42,000, money we'd been diligently saving for years, the account showed a balance of $7,893.24. With trembling fingers, I pulled up the transaction history. There it was, a series of withdrawals over the past 6 months, ranging from $1,500 to $4,000, totaling nearly $35,000. Son of a Jessica breathed. He's been funding his escape. I stared at the screen, numb with shock. This wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. This was financial sabotage. Michael had been systematically draining our savings while maintaining the facade of our normal life.
Mom?
Megan's voice came from the doorway. I quickly closed the laptop, forcing a smile. Morning, sweetheart. Aunt Jessica came to visit. Megan wasn't fooled. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her expression too mature for her 13 years. Is Dad still leaving today? Before I could answer, Michael appeared behind her, carrying a large suitcase. I'm going to load up the car, he said quietly, avoiding my gaze. Jessica's eyes narrowed dangerously. Kids, why don't you go have some cereal in the den and watch television for a bit? The grown-ups need to talk. Megan looked like she might protest, but then nodded, taking Noah's hand and leading him away. Once they were out of earshot, Jessica rounded on Michael. You stole from your family, she stated, her voice vibrating with controlled fury. Michael froze, his expression confirming his guilt before he could formulate a denial. What are you talking about? The savings account, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. $35,000, Michael. What did you do with it? He set the suitcase down slowly. It's not what you think. Then, what is it? I demanded. Because it looks like you've been planning this departure for months, financing it with money we saved together. Michael's eyes darted between Jessica and me, calculating. I set it aside, he finally admitted, for expenses during the transition. Lawyer fees, security deposit on a new place. I was going to tell you. After you emptied the account entirely? Jessica interjected. This isn't your business, Jess, Michael snapped. My sister and her children are my business, she fired back. Especially when someone is stealing their financial security. I stood up slowly, a strange calm settling over me. Put the money back, Michael. All of it. Today. Sarah, be reasonable. I don't care what you need, I interrupted, my voice glacial. That money belongs to this family, the family you're abandoning. You will transfer it back before you leave this house, or I will call the police and report financial fraud. Michael blanched. You wouldn't do that. Try me, I challenged, meeting his gaze without flinching. The children's college funds better be untouched too. I'll be checking those next. Something in my expression must have convinced him. After a tense moment, he nodded stiffly. Fine, I'll make the transfer. As he reached for his phone, I felt a shift inside me. A hardening, a crystallization of resolve. This was no longer just about a husband leaving his wife. This was about a calculated betrayal that extended beyond the emotional into the practical foundations of our life. Michael hadn't just broken my heart, he had deliberately undermined our family's security. In that moment, watching him reluctantly transfer back funds he had secretly diverted, I knew with absolute clarity that this would not be the amicable, dignified separation he clearly envisioned. This would be a reckoning. And I was just beginning to understand how much there was to reckon with. After confirming that Michael had transferred the money back to our joint savings account, I felt a curious sense of detachment wash over me. The initial shock had given way to something colder, more calculated. I watched him moving around the house, gathering his possessions, and realized I was observing him as if he were a stranger, which, in many ways, he now was. "I need to get the kids ready for school," I announced, my voice steady. "Jessica, can you stay and make sure everything here is taken care of?" My sister nodded, understanding my unspoken request to monitor Michael's departure. "Of course. I took the day off. I'm not going anywhere." Michael looked between us, frowning. "The kids shouldn't go to school today. Not with everything that's happening." "What's happening is their father is leaving," I replied evenly. "That's no reason to disrupt their education as well as their home life. Sarah, be reasonable." "Don't," I cut him off, my tone sharp enough to make him flinch. "Don't tell me what's reasonable when you've been lying to all of us for 14 months. Before he could respond, I turned and headed upstairs to find the children. Megan was in her room, already dressed in jeans and a hoodie, her backpack packed beside her, always the organized one, even in crisis. "We still going to school?" she asked, her expression unreadable. "Yes," I confirmed. "I think routine is important right now." She nodded slowly. "So Dad can leave while we're gone. Is that the plan?" Sometimes I forgot how perceptive she was, how little got past her. "Partly," I admitted. "But also because I need some time to think. And I can do that better knowing you're safe at school, doing normal things." "Nothing feels normal anymore, Mom." I sat beside her on the bed, taking her hand. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm so sorry about that. But we're going to get through this, I promise." "He's really moving in with that woman today?" The hurt in her voice made my chest ache. "That's what he says," I replied, careful not to let my own bitterness seep into my tone. "But I want you to know something important. No matter what happens with your dad and me, we both love you and Noah. That hasn't changed, and it won't change." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "But everything else is changing." I couldn't argue with that. Instead, I hugged her close, letting her cry against my shoulder. "Change can be scary," I whispered into her hair. "But we're strong, Megan. Stronger than you know. We'll figure this out together." After a moment, she pulled away, wiping her eyes. "I'll go check on Noah, make sure he's getting ready." I watched her go, marveling at her resilience, then moved to the master bathroom and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed different from yesterday. Harder, more focused. Good. I would need that strength in the days to come. 15 minutes later, we were all downstairs. Michael stood awkwardly by the door as the children ate breakfast, Jessica supervising from the kitchen island, her expression making it clear she was guarding against any further financial maneuvers. "I should say goodbye to the kids," Michael said quietly when I approached. I nodded. "Yes, you should." "But, Michael," I lowered my voice so only he could hear, "if you make promises you don't intend to keep, if you hurt them more than you already have, there will be consequences." His eyes widened slightly at my tone. "They're my children too, Sarah." "Then start acting like a father," I replied coldly. "A father doesn't abandon his family for a woman he's known less than 2 years." Michael looked like he might argue, but then seemed to think better of it. He moved to the kitchen table, crouching between Megan and Noah's chairs. "Hey guys," he began, his voice unnaturally cheerful. "I know things are a bit confusing right now." Megan stared stonily at her cereal. Noah looked up with wide, uncertain eyes. I'm going to be staying somewhere else for a while, Michael continued, but I'll still see you all the time. We can do fun things together on weekends, and I'll come to all your school events. With her? Megan asked suddenly, looking up to fix her father with an accusing stare. Michael faltered. Well, sometimes, maybe. Christine is. She's going to be part of my life now, and I hope someday you'll get to know her. I don't want to, Megan interrupted flatly. I don't want to know the person who broke up our family. Michael glanced at me as if expecting me to intervene, to soften Megan's stance. I remained silent. These were her feelings, valid and raw. I wouldn't police them to make him more comfortable. Megan, it's more complicated than that. Michael tried again. Sometimes adults, their feelings change. That doesn't mean I don't love you and Noah with all my heart. If you loved us, you wouldn't leave, Noah said quietly, his lower lip trembling. The simplicity of the statement hit like a physical blow. Michael looked stricken, clearly unprepared for such direct confrontation from his 10-year-old son. Buddy! That's not true, he protested. I do love you. So much. And we'll still have lots of time together. When? Liam demanded. After school? On weekends? When we get sick? Will you still come to my baseball games? Of course I will, Michael assured him. I wouldn't miss them. You missed the last two, Noah pointed out, his expression breaking my heart with its mixture of hurt and accusation. You said you had to work late. The realization struck us both simultaneously. Those late nights at the hospital had likely been spent with Christine. Michael had already been choosing her over his children's activities. I'll be there for the next one, Michael promised, his voice strained. I swear. Time for school, I interjected, unable to watch this painful exchange continue. Go brush your teeth and grab your backpacks. The children slid from their chairs, Megan taking Noah's hand as they headed upstairs. Once they were out of earshot, I turned to Michael. You've been missing their events for her, I stated, not a question but an indictment. Michael had the grace to look ashamed. Not all of them, just sometimes. Those moments matter, Michael. They're children. They notice who shows up for them and who doesn't. I know that, he snapped, defensive now. I don't need parenting advice from you. Clearly you need it from someone, Jessica interjected from her position at the island. Since you're failing spectacularly at the moment. Michael glared at her. Jessica, with all due respect. You haven't earned any respect, she cut in. Not after what you've done. I raised a hand, stopping their brewing argument. Not now, not with the kids upstairs. I turned to Michael. When will you be back for the rest of your things? He seemed taken aback by the practical question. I'm not sure. Maybe this weekend? Fine. Text me first. I'd prefer the children not be here. Sarah, he started, then stopped, seemingly unsure what to say. I know this isn't how either of us wanted things to end. A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. Don't pretend to know what I want, Michael. You forfeited that right when you started sleeping with a pharmaceutical executive while telling me you were working late. His face flushed with anger or embarrassment. I couldn't tell which and didn't care. This isn't productive. No, I agreed coldly. Neither was our marriage, apparently. The sound of footsteps on the stairs signaled the children's return. Michael straightened, composing his expression into something resembling fatherly concern. He hugged each child, making more promises about calls and visits that I silently catalogued, knowing I would hold him to every single one. As I walked them to the car for the drive to school, I could feel Michael watching from the doorway. Neither child looked back at him. The school drop-off was a blur. I maintained a facade of normalcy, smiling and waving to teachers, exchanging pleasantries with other parents. No one needed to know that my life had imploded less than 12 hours ago. The children seemed to take their cue from me, going through the motions of their morning routine with admirable composure. Once they had disappeared into their respective buildings, I sat in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. For a brief moment, I considered driving to the hospital, finding this Christine person, confronting her face to face. The fantasy was vivid, the shocked expressions of Michael's colleagues, the public humiliation of the woman who had helped destroy my family. But what would that accomplish beyond momentary satisfaction? It would make me look unstable, desperate. It would turn me into a spectacle, a cautionary tale whispered about in hospital corridors. No, that wasn't the way forward. I started the car and drove, not home, where Michael might still be packing, but to the coffee shop near my favorite park. Once there, I ordered a large coffee, found a quiet corner table, and pulled out a notebook and pen from my purse. "Think, Sarah," I murmured to myself. "Don't react. Plan." On the blank page, I began to list everything I knew. Michael has been having an affair with Christine for approximately 14 months. He has been planning to leave for at least 6 months. He withdrew $35,000 from our joint savings without my knowledge. He has allowed Christine into our home at least once. He has been missing children's events to spend time with her. Then I made a second list of what I needed to know. What is our exact financial situation? What are my legal rights regarding the house, custody, assets? How much has Michael told Christine about our personal lives? Are there other accounts or assets I don't know about? And finally, a third list of immediate actions. Contact a divorce attorney, secure copies of all financial records, change passwords on personal accounts, establish clear boundaries for Michael's contact with the children, find a therapist for the children and myself. Looking at the lists, I felt a strange sense of calm descend. This was manageable, difficult, painful, but manageable. By breaking down the overwhelming situation into concrete problems with specific solutions, I had given myself a roadmap through the chaos. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "He's gone. Took about 6 suitcases and his computer. I'm still here. You okay?" I typed back, "On my way home," made a plan. As I drove back to the house, my house now, I supposed, I realized that the crushing pain I had felt last night had transformed into something different. Not gone, certainly, but channeled into a clear-eyed determination. Michael had made his choice, calculating and deliberate. Now, I would make mine, with equal deliberation but greater integrity. He might have broken our family, but he would not break me. When I returned home, Jessica had transformed the kitchen into a command center. Spread across the island were stacks of papers she'd pulled from our home office, bank statements, insurance policies, property records, organized with a precision that reflected her accountant's mind. "I hope you don't mind," she said, looking up as I entered. "I thought we should get a clear picture of your financial situation." The weight of her words. Your financial situation, not our financial situation, landed with unexpected force. So much of my adult life had been framed as part of a couple, a partnership. Now I was a singular entity again, solely responsible for navigating this new reality. "Thank you," I said, setting down my purse and joining her at the island. "This is exactly what I need." Jessica squeezed my shoulder. "How are you holding up?" "Surprisingly steady," I admitted. "I think I'm still in shock, but it's productive shock. Is that a thing? For someone as pragmatic as you?" "Absolutely." She pushed a legal pad toward me. "I've made some notes based on what I've found so far. The good news is that Michael seems to have been telling the truth about the savings account. That's the only major withdrawal I can see. Your retirement accounts appear untouched, as do the kids' college funds." Relief flooded through me. That was something at least. But, Jessica continued, I'm concerned about a few credit card statements. Look at this one. She pointed to a series of charges from hotels, not in our city, but in towns within a 2-hour drive. These line up with some of those conferences Michael claimed to be attending. The charges are all for 2-night stays. My stomach twisted. So he was taking her on weekend getaways while telling me he was at medical administration conferences. Jessica nodded grimly. And charging it to your joint credit card. You've been helping finance his affair. The violation was layered, each revelation peeling back another level of betrayal. Not only had he been unfaithful, but he'd used our shared resources to facilitate it, resources that I had contributed to through my freelance design work. The mortgage is in both your names, Jessica continued, moving to another stack of papers, and based on these property tax records, you've built up about $180. Zero in equity since you bought the place. In a divorce, that would typically be split equally. The word divorce hung in the air, concrete and inevitable. Until that moment, I hadn't consciously thought of the legal term for what was happening, but of course that's where this was heading. My marriage was over. I needed to formalize its dissolution. I need a lawyer, I said, voicing the thought aloud. Already on it, Jessica replied. I called Rachel Howard. Rachel Howard was a friend from Jessica's college days, who had become one of the city's most respected divorce attorneys, known for her ruthless efficiency. She specialized in cases involving infidelity and financial misconduct. She can see you tomorrow morning at 9, Jessica added. I hope that's okay. I thought moving quickly was important, especially given everything. It's perfect, I said gratefully. Thank you for thinking of that. Of course. Jessica's expression softened. You need a team, Sarah. No one should go through this alone. Her words reminded me of something else I'd decided in the coffee shop. I'm going to call Diane too. Diane Miller had been my closest friend since we met in a prenatal yoga class while both pregnant with our first children. She was loyal, discreet, and unfailingly honest. Qualities I desperately needed right now. Good idea, Jessica agreed. The more support, the better. She hesitated slightly. And what about Mom and Dad? Should we tell them? I winced at the thought. Our parents, married for 47 years, had always adored Michael. They would be devastated by this news, and their disappointment would add another layer of emotional complexity I wasn't sure I could handle yet. Not yet, I decided. Let me get through the initial legal consultation first. Figure out what I'm dealing with. Then I'll call them. Jessica nodded, understanding. Your call. But don't wait too long. News like this has a way of traveling. I pulled out my phone and texted Diane. Need to talk ASAP. Something's happened. Can you come by tonight after the kids are in bed? Her response was immediate. Of course. Everything okay? I stared at her question, unsure how to answer. Nothing was okay, and yet I was functioning, breathing, planning. No, I finally replied. But I will be 8:30? I'll be there, came the quick response. With that arranged, I turned back to the financial documents, focusing my attention on understanding exactly what resources I had at my disposal. The house was our most significant asset, followed by retirement accounts and the children's college funds. My freelance graphic design business had been growing steadily over the past few years, but still provided only supplemental income to Michael's hospital administrator salary. I need to increase my client base, I mused, thinking aloud, if I'm going to support the kids on my own. One step at a time, Jessica cautioned. First, let's secure what you already have. Rachel will help with that part. We spent the next hour organizing documents, making copies of important papers, and creating a comprehensive inventory of assets. By the time we finished, it was nearly time to pick up the children from school. "I'm coming with you," Jessica announced when I grabbed my car keys. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, those kids could use a little extra love today." I couldn't argue with that. The school pickup went as smoothly as could be expected under the circumstances. Both children were subdued, but composed. Noah brightened considerably when he saw Jessica in the car, immediately launching into a story about the classroom guinea pig that had escaped during science period. "Aunt Jessica, are you staying for dinner?" he asked as we drove home. "If that's okay with you guys," she replied, glancing at me for confirmation. "More than okay," I assured her. "In fact, Aunt Jessica might be staying with us for a few days. Would you like that?" Noah nodded enthusiastically. Megan, in the front passenger seat, gave me a knowing look. "Because of Dad leaving," she stated flatly. I met her gaze steadily. "Yes, I thought it would be nice to have her around while we adjust to the changes." Megan considered this, then nodded. "Good. I'm glad you won't be alone." Her maturity both impressed and concerned me. 13 was too young to be worrying about a parent's emotional well-being. "I'm not alone," I said gently. "I have you and Noah." "That's different," she replied with that disconcerting wisdom. "We're kids. You need grown-up support." From the back seat, Jessica caught my eye in the rearview mirror, her expression saying what we were both thinking. Megan was processing this with remarkable insight, but would need careful attention in the days ahead. Back home, we fell into a routine that felt almost normal. Homework at the kitchen table, dinner preparation, casual conversation about school events and upcoming projects. If not for the conspicuous absence of Michael and the undercurrent of tension, it might have been any ordinary afternoon. After dinner, as the children retreated to their rooms for pre-bedtime activities, I found myself standing in the master bedroom, staring at Michael's side of the closet. Though he had taken several suitcases worth of clothing, much remained, suits hanging neatly, dress shoes lined up on the rack, casual wear folded in drawers. The physical remnants of his presence felt like a taunt. Without conscious thought, I began pulling items from hangers, expensive suits he'd bought for hospital fundraisers, designer shirts I'd gifted him for birthdays and Christmases. Soon, a pile formed on the bed, growing larger, as I methodically emptied his side of the closet. "What are you doing?" Jessica asked from the doorway, watching with raised eyebrows. "Reclaiming my space," I replied, not breaking rhythm as I pulled another suit from its hanger. If he wants to live with Christine, he can keep his possessions with Christine. Jessica stepped into the room, surveying the heap of clothing. "Want some boxes? I saw some in the garage from that furniture delivery last month." "Perfect." Together, we worked silently, folding and packing Michael's remaining clothes, toiletries, books, and personal effects. There was something therapeutic about the process. Each item removed felt like severing another tie that bound me to him. "What about his drawer in the nightstand?" Jessica asked, pointing to his side of the bed. I opened it cautiously, half expecting to find more evidence of betrayal. Instead, I found the mundane artifacts of a shared life. Reading glasses, a half-empty tube of hand cream, a dog-eared novel, charging cables. As I swept the contents into a box, a small leather-bound book caught my eye. I pulled it out, recognizing it as the pocket planner Michael carried to keep track of meetings and appointments. "Should I look?" I asked Jessica, turning the planner over in my hands. She shrugged. "It might contain useful information for your meeting with Rachel tomorrow." Decision made. I opened it, flipping through the pages of the current month. Most entries were benign: board meetings, staff evaluations, doctor's appointments for the children. But as I turned to previous months, patterns emerged. Regular blocks of time labeled simply C appeared every few days, often during hours he had told me he was working late or attending committee meetings. C. For Christine, Jessica said, reading over my shoulder. Not exactly a master of deception, is he? He didn't need to be, I replied bitterly. I trusted him completely. As I turned back further through the planner, I stumbled upon an entry from February that made me freeze. Diamond ring. Tiffany. Oh my God, I whispered, showing Jessica. Her eyes widened. He bought her jewelry. Not just jewelry. A ring. The implication was clear and devastating. He's planning to marry her. The discovery hit with physical force, stealing my breath. One thing to have an affair, to decide to leave your family, another entirely to be planning a new marriage while still entrenched in the current one. The level of calculated deception was staggering. Sarah, Jessica began carefully, this changes things. If he's been planning to remarry, there may be other preparations we haven't found yet. Joint accounts, property. The doorbell rang, interrupting her speculation. I glanced at my watch. 8:30. Diane had arrived. I need to get that, I said, setting the planner aside. But I'm keeping this as evidence. Jessica nodded. Go. I'll finish up here and check on the kids. As I descended the stairs, I felt a peculiar lightness. Each revelation, though painful, clarified my path forward. The discovery of Michael's intention regarding Christine had somehow crystallized my own resolve. I was no longer merely responding to a crisis. I was actively charting a course through it. Diane stood on the porch, a tote bag slung over her shoulder that I knew contained wine and chocolate, her standard emergency kit for difficult conversations. Her expression was worried but determined. What's happened? She asked immediately. I opened the door wider, inviting her in. Michael's been having an affair for 14 months. He's moved out. I need your help figuring out what comes next.